All right, time for a little update. So it's been 2 weeks since I did sort of the two minute thing, that video demo that went on Reddit and on Twitter and all that. So I got a couple hundred impressions across Twitter and also YouTube. So that was good. So yeah, I've been just working the last week and a bit on refactoring. I just merged some code. As well, yeah, shout out to Derek, who's written a little bit of a README. He sort of fought through all my crappy documentation to go set this up himself. So he wrote a little bit of documentation, and that got merged. So that's cool. Thanks, Derek. So yeah, I just merged updates into the JavaScript directory. Yeah, it's still the buyer, seller, and wallet applications, but yeah, this Moneysocket common library. So what I've been doing is refactoring and renaming it. So I'm kind of envisioning how the developer docs will eventually work. So I'm looking at sort of the common WebSocket library, and this is just the API. So if you're a JavaScript developer, this is how you start and go use a WebSocket. So this is very, very common. It's built into everything. Most things use WebSockets. It's been stable. It's good for a long time, and it's a very simple API in that you have to when you create a WebSocket object, you go register functions. There's 4 you got to register: on, open, message, error, and close. So that's very, very straightforward. There's only 4. And then there's a few additional calls of you can close, and then I forget. There's one other one. Yeah. Send and close. Of course, you got to send data and close, and then when you receive messages, it comes via the message. And then when you create it, open might not happen for immediately, so you get a callback when that happens. So there's these callbacks that happen, but then when you want to send messages or close the socket, you have to go initiate that. So I'm reading this and thinking about, okay, well, eventually when I want Moneysocket to be used by developers and hopefully stable and been around for a long time, we need to have a good set of documentation like this that's sort of minimally crisp and sensical. So in refactoring the JavaScript, I'm kind of starting to formulate what I think sort of that front-facing Moneysocket API looks like. So this won't be the final update, but I've produced these consumer and provider objects, consumer stack, provider stack, that in the same way the WebSocket is on open, on message, on close, on error. I'm kind of adopting that style: on announce, on revoke, on provider info, on paying, on invoice, on pre-image. So there's those set of callbacks, but then also there's additional calls into the stack to go initiate things in the same way that the WebSocket's kind of two ways that way. So as I mentioned, I'm not, this won't be the final form, but it's at least I'm converging all the cosmetics. When I was developing, I kind of overnamed things, so I had maybe more words and more syllables in all the method calls, because that was when you're still formulating, it's kind of helpful to overname it, so at least it reminds you what it meant to be as you're kind of fleshing things out. But once it's fleshed out, it's it's not really code you intend to recontemplate, and really the names should reflect what the new observer is going to see, to kind of signal that it's been well thought through. We know exactly what this is. There's a key concept here. So if you're reading this, if you understand the key concept, you can kind of understand all this large volume of code that's sort of named in conjunction with that concept. So I've been filling that in. So what that looks like as far as the app goes, so the buyer and the seller with their custom stacks, I've also conformed that. But the wallet app, which is fairly straightforward, basically you're creating these 2 objects. All this UI stuff and all that is application specific. So if you're writing a new app, you won't give a crap about how the UI of some old app is, but you will care about how that app interacts with the Moneysocket. So there's a provider stack and a consumer stack in that wallet app. Of course, there's different arrangements. But when you want to set up a provider stack, you have to go then provide on announce, on revoke, on stack event, handle invoice request, handle pay request, handle provider info request for the provider. And then consumer, it's kind of the same, but with like a few different specifics. And then, if you want to initiate things, you call directly into the stack to say, give me an invoice. That's the consumer stack. So yeah, it's sort of the same basic thing, but obviously the WebSockets or the Moneysockets are a little more complex than just a straight data transport. So there's inevitably going to be more complexity. And then I'm not even sure, if the stack is ultimately the right level of interaction for Moneysocket. It's pretty good, but it does announce nexuses. So it's a little bit different than the WebSocket. You kind of like, that's the noun, a socket. Here the noun is a stack, and the stack then provides nexuses, which are kind of like sockets. So as far as JavaScript goes, that might be overbuilt. However, on the Python side, I'm not so sure about that, because when you have back-end applications that are sort of embedded, to have multiple redundant connections and to support migration use cases and all that, it's having that extra flexibility is perhaps a benefit. Whereas for like just the minimal, simple, I just want to write a browser app, simplifying it a little more to kind of get away from the notion of like, you have to understand what a stack is and the multiple layers and all those things. It might not be appropriate ultimately for some JavaScript applications. So maybe even way down the road, there might be like a complex JavaScript implementation that allows you to do all the Node.js backend embedded stuff and the more advanced Moneysocket stuff. But then like just the on Rails, super straightforward, maybe perhaps a little bit opinionated way of doing a Moneysocket, which is very much is minimal additional complexity on top of a WebSocket as you need. It's a WebSocket with a few extra calls that allow you to move money. There might be a reason to have two JavaScript libraries down the road. Of course, this is an open protocol. Anybody can implement what they want. Perhaps it might just evolve naturally. But yeah, I'm thinking about those things quite a bit. And then I went through and this is just the look of the Moneysocket directory. So this is what we're going to move out to its own repo eventually, and then you'll be able to like npm install this. So I've got the consumer and provider stack, which is what the basic wallet uses. The buyer and the seller app. Re-implement these with additional layers, but they're all in the same style. But these are sort of the main things that the app will talk with. Then the layer, there's a number of different layers provided, provider and consumer side. And then I'll show you the other picture. But yeah, also the nexus. So there's sort of these three tiers of objects. There's the stack object, which is the primary interaction for the app. And then the stack is built up of multiple layers. And the layers pass nexus connections upwards through the stack and add different things at each layer. So that's roughly how it goes. But yeah, so I have those split into three directories. The way I had it before wasn't quite as clean, so that's part of the refactor I've done this week, is to fix that up. I haven't done the Python yet. That's the next step now that I've kind of got this in semi-decent order. I think working on the Python next is appropriate, and that'll probably take a good week. I also drew this picture, so to just get away from the actual code. I've been just to get the picture clear in my head. So there's a bunch of thoughts and these are probably like, again, further down the road thoughts. I think I need to focus on getting more practical stuff done in the near term. But there's a lot of cool stuff happening in the Lightning Network. So this is a thing that's been around. Hosted channels like the BLW wallet has this. I think Anton's working on a new wallet. And then even Fiat Jaff with his LNTX bot, he's doing virtual virtual nodes. I'm not sure what the right terminology is, or even if it's settled on terminology, but kind of this notion that if you're sending to a Lightning Network node, that node can then have multiple clients that connect through it. Phoenix Async Wallet does this as well, where you're routing to a node that's behind the endpoint, and that's not handled on the Lightning Network proper. That's sort of handled to then go into a particular account or something like that. I'm not sure, like the Phoenix wallet. I might have misspoke about Phoenix because they actually have channels to the wallet. But the Lightning Network's kind of thought through in this regard, where you might have virtual channels. So I've kind of contemplated, now that I have this like ecosystem of different applications. So with the StableD and the Terminus, then providing a wallet for two parties, and then also the app that's got sort of the domain specific knowledge of how that interaction goes. So I got my seller, and I've got these guys, seller and buyer. They have that. So we have literally here like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, potentially 8 pieces, 8 or more pieces of software that are part of a Lightning Network transaction that aren't actually on the Lightning Network. And I'm actually starting to see that some of the first iteration of the Lightning Network and some of this, while I think this is pretty cool stuff, I think maybe, again, I'm not going to work on this anytime soon, but thinking of it in a way where each of these things can be, sort of a virtual Lightning Network node, where there's sort of a hosted channel. You can read about this. This might not entirely accommodate, and I think it doesn't entirely accommodate all of what I'm thinking about. But this idea that as we're paying through here, the payment, in the pre-image propagates such that if, there's this, so I've got these numbers, so like a buyer requested an invoice from a seller, and I've got all this numbered in order of how things actually proceeds when I've given the demo. There's this process of requesting an invoice being returned to the buyer, and then the buyer passes it back to their terminus to pay, and then the act of paying it creates HTLCs to the seller. Once the seller has the HTLC matching his pre-image, it will release the pre-image this way to tell, basically to take the money from the intermediates and the buyer node. But also it releases the pre-image up this way such that the seller knows that he's been paid and therefore can give the good or service. So that's kind of all been documented, and I'm just kind of thinking about, this is I'm kind of fudging it. If you're kind of thinking about, how some people have kind of imagined the Lightning Network, one answer is like put a neutrino node on each of these and create an actual channel in each part. And I'm thinking, well, not every single device, particularly something that you can spin up and spin down in a browser tab, we don't want to like create a channel there. However, if interesting and well thought out engineering has been done around these things, and you're relying on the fact that inherently there's some level of trust from this seller going back to some provider, how do we be somewhat pseudo Lightning Network in kind of this more lightweight way where we can observe bolt 11s and pre-images, and then when these things match, we can then deduce that the Satoshis have changed hands and that kind of thing. But then also, if we have private and public keys in each of these instances, how to then essentially advertise and potentially, we don't have to advertise, maybe that's the wrong term, but to behave in sort of this pseudo Lightning Network way where we can potentially onion route through these intermediate nodes in the same way that these down here are onion routed. So that's one thing I'm thinking about, and I'm brainstorming a little bit as I'm describing this and drawing this picture. So if you have any ideas, certainly this is a far more advanced discussion than is going to get implemented anytime soon. But certainly I'm on the hunt for discussions and theoretical thinking along these lines. So if that's an interesting discussion, please get in touch, and maybe we can brainstorm a little bit more about how that might work. And doing it sooner rather than later, I think we'll kind of get some of the proper thinking embedded into the protocol. But yeah, I'll wrap it here. That's 15 minutes. That's a little bit long. I'm going to work on the Python refactoring next. I'm going to make it, reflect what I showed you in the JavaScript. And then, yeah, I got to start working on replacing this wallet with an actual something that looks a little more end user ready rather than this junk. All right, thank you.